Welcome to the Gab Lab, a space for open hearts and thoughtful minds. Here we follow what lights us up, we play in the mystery, and explore the wonder of being alive. Come as you are, stay as long as you like, and stay curious. Metaterrestrial is a portmanteau of metaphysical and extraterrestrial, meaning something which originates outside the ordinary three-dimensional space-time framework in which we normally function. Much like the name, Metaterrestrial uses live performance to take the listener on a sonic journey that defies geological borders and defined genres. Using spoken word, visual and auditory stimuli, Metaterrestrial seeks to drive forward a much larger concept that there exists much more than we can perceive with our own two eyes. Welcome back to another episode of the Gab Lab podcast. It has been a long time. This is the first episode I've done in, it's been like 2 years. I've had a lot going on in life. Have a baby now. I have another baby on the way. Moved. So much is going on. But let's get into the podcast. So I'm interviewing my friend Anthony Arcuri, one of my closest friends. Among the many hats and titles he wears the Metaterrestrial mask, which many of you have seen. It's really, really cool. But what is the meaning of this mask? What is behind it? Well, we're going to get into that today. We talk about his origin with music as a teenager, playing guitar, DJing. We talk about his shooting event where he was the victim of a home invasion, which changed the course of his life. We talk about his music project, Metaterrestrial, what it means, and a lot of other goodies. So let's dive into it. Welcome, Tony. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, this has been a long time coming. We've been talking about doing this podcast for a while, and I'm really excited that you're able to come out and do it. And this is the guest bedroom / recording studio / yoga room. So
I think I've slept in this room.
Yep, you have. So welcome to the log cabin.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're here to talk about your music project, Metaterrestrial, and just wanted to jump right into it to give a kind of a baseline about like your origin. What got you into music, specifically with DJing and guitar? Like, where did that all begin for you?
Music in general is something like I've always been drawn to. I started playing guitar when I was maybe 13. I actually wanted to be a drummer when I was a lot younger, but having a drum set in my house was just not gonna fly for my family. Yeah. And they got me some rinky-dink electric one that was it was bad, and so I just ended up gravitating towards guitar, but I always kept the percussion, wanted to continue making beats and stuff much later on, and guitar was something that my dad knew, so he was able to teach me. And my uncle passed away when I was a lot younger, and I actually inherited all of his guitars.
Whoa!
Because I was starting to have an interest in guitar. And so, I had all these guitars, and so I just started to learn them more and more. And my dad taught me the basics, Working Man from Rush and yeah. Iron Man from Black Sabbath, and all the classics, Smoke on the Water and all that. But I kind of just taught myself. And
was this when you were a teenager?
This when I was a teenager, yeah.
That's cool.
And but I still kept a lot of instruments around the house, I still kept some drums here and there, and I got some better drums over the years, and I kept playing, but I definitely leaned more into guitar over the years, and I fell in love with it, and it was just like my solace. I just would sit in my room, play guitar for hours. I would always wanted to like learn songs that I liked, and that's kind of how I taught myself, was just from learning other songs that I wanted to learn, and then through that, learning shapes and figuring out chords and learning all the notes and everything. But I wasn't classically trained. I've started to learn theory over like the last 10 years, but yeah, I was mostly interested in metal and like harder music. Like punk and metal was kind of like my early influence, and yeah, so electronic music kind of came later, but through like more like rave culture, I think early influences like like Aphex Twin was like a big influence early on. Early Infected Mushroom, early Simon Posford stuff. So like Hallucinogen and like all of his projects. But
before we get into electronic music, I just wanted to note that the guitar, like playing the guitar, was like your solace. What was that doing for you as like a teenager? Like what was that solace that you found?
I felt like it was a way for me to like channel energy. And also a way to, like a catharsis, a way for me to, like having emotions or having feelings or just like feeling and then being able to express that, which is kind of just like notoriously like what feels good about playing music. But, for me, it was, definitely something that was medicinal and still is. And so like, just playing a physical instrument will always be superior for me in terms of that expression and that catharsis and being able to like process emotions and everything. Curating playlists or DJing and things like that, that's great and I love that. But there's definitely something special and like different and more personal and deeper for me when it comes to playing guitar and like other instruments. Yeah.
Maybe like something about like it uses your whole body, like you're using your hands and maybe even your feet, but you're using your body more than just like pushing buttons and turning knobs,
right?
It's like, and like a lot of emotion is stored in the body, and using your body and getting out of your head. Maybe that's what's
definitely it is a meditation. It's you have to quiet the mind to an extent. And I've noticed the more I'm thinking about what I'm playing sometimes, the more complicated it is, the more I'm thinking about it, the more I'm likely to mess it up.
Right.
And when I just like feel into it and just like remove the mind, it's like a lot more fluid.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll notice that whenever I like play didgeridoo or something, or do my my jaw harp. And I'm like, oh, that sounds good. And then like immediately mess it up because I'm thinking about it instead of just being in the flow.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, and then you got into like rave culture in your later teens, or what was it?
Later teens. Like I would say like 17 years old was when I first got into it. But it was just something different. I had been in that like, trying to find the heaviest heavy metal and like the darkest, like I was very attracted to that, and which was kind of stemming from like a bit of a rebellion for me and coming out of a, like a strict Christian household, which is kind of classic for like a lot of like young, like satanic metal enthusiasts. It's just kind of reverse Christianity, it's like it's a rebellion. And I reached a point, and I think also through my introduction to like psychedelics and and like mind opening substances like that, it just wasn't hitting the same for me anymore, and I felt like I kind of got that out of my system. And then I was becoming attracted to the lighter things, and things that like really touched my heart, rather than like feeding this like anger or angst. There was a limit to that for me. And once that was satisfied and satiated, I feel like it was like, okay, now I'm like ready for what my heart wants, like what makes my heart feel good.
Yeah.
And
it's
so
cool to see that, like, it's like an evolution of processing emotions. Like, you can see it as like a cadence through your musical interests, where it's like you have the feelings, and it's like the music, like the heavy metal and stuff, like helped you like feel it, right? But then you get to a point where you're like saturated. You're like, okay, I feel it. Now what am I going to do with it? Like, how do I, like transcend that and like move up.
Right.
And it's just something I noticed, like, and I think that I probably did that too. I used to really like Linkin Park and like, really, really emo, edgy music. And then like, I listen to it now and it just feels cringy to me, and I like laugh at it. But like, I like to listen to music that's like transformational.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same here.
Very cool.
Yeah, perfect for the time, but then, with time and growth comes the need for other things. Yeah.
Right, right. So you were growing and moving, and your musical taste and interests evolved with that. And so you would go to raves and you started getting interested in the music. At what point did you think, like, I want to start messing around with some CDJs? And
Well, actually, my introduction to the rave culture was through a friend that I became introduced to that he was not from around where we lived, like our group of friends. We were starting to become interested in the music, and it was like, this like interesting counterculture, and but we hadn't been to anything. We hadn't like gone to an event, and a lot of us were too young to even get into many of them. So, but we met this guy named Nick, and he had to travel a lot because of his father's job, and so he had been all over the world, and he had lived in Europe, and he had a lot of experience with the underground rave culture in Europe, and he heard us listening to the music we were listening to, and we kind of got into that conversation, and he just blew our heads all the way open on that, and he really cultured us, and we became like fast friends, and we were all hanging out all the time, and we would have raves at his house, and he just really showed us what it was, outside of the United States and outside of like what it may be through the lens of mainstream perception, and
was it like a lot of like UK garage and like jungle influences?
It was a lot of house, techno, trance, and drum and bass at that time.
Yeah.
And I hadn't got introduced into UK garage and stuff like that until a little bit later. But yeah, it was a lot of drum and bass and trance and things like that. Yeah, so that was my intro, and the events that we would have at his house is kind of what brought on the need for me to get equipment, because I was the one that was collecting the music and getting all interested into the music and really leaning into the music aspect of it, and just learning more and more. A mixture of what he would show me and what I would find on my own from that, and I was just playing it from my iPod, and it got to a point where it was like, the pause between songs. It's just like, it'd be nice if we could just make this continuous. And
right.
So it was like a very raw way of kind of getting into it. It was just kind of through necessity almost, like we need to keep the music going. We're like vibing out till like 5, 6 in the morning, and then it's nice to have some continuous music. And back then we didn't have like playlists of like hour-long mixes and everything like we have access to now. So, So it was just the necessity for our events, for me to get something, and
I love that.
Yeah.
That's so cool. That is so cool. And so then you started like getting equipment, and you started like thinking like, I actually really like doing this.
Yeah.
And you really started to go into that. You're like at this point in your like early 20s.
Yeah. I mean, this was like 17, 18. Was those years, and then I had already had equipment well into my 20s, and just trying to expand and upgrade from there. I had, I think, a pair of Newmark Axis 9s.
Okay.
They were it was a CD CD turntable. There was 2 of them, and then there was a 4-channel mixer. The effects were actually on the CD players themselves, and the looping, and like there was like 2 channels of looping. It's a very odd system, and you don't see it anymore, and hardly anyone probably knows about it.
Yeah.
It taught me to learn in kind of the worst case scenario, like they would skip and you'd have to just like figure it out, like just make it work.
Yeah. Yep.
And so, it wasn't till like a little bit later, I think it was maybe 2021 that I actually got a pair of Pioneer CDJs. But I started out with some, pretty rough equipment, but it taught me how to really how to beat match, taught me really how to improvise, and I can pretty much play on anything now, and that's thanks to the shitty equipment I started with.
Right.
Yeah.
That's amazing that, you start with like the manual rough stuff, and then now like everything is like really, really very advanced. Like do CDJs, I haven't really messed with them. I played with like virtual DJ on the computer, but they do like beat matching and things like that. Like
I think it was like 2000s and to the 2000 Nexus 2s and later have all had the sync feature on that, which it opens up other possibilities. You're not focused on like keeping a beat match the whole time. I know like playing on vinyl, which is something that I like to do sometimes, you're kind of having to maintain these, and it's like little micro adjustments with the tempo to like, maintain the tempo, and it doesn't allow for much else sometimes, you get locked in and maybe you can do some other things, but there is a lot of focus and like your hand's attention on beat matching and keeping the tempo. And so having sync features is definitely opening up more possibilities, and I don't really use it personally unless I'm like just trying to like bring 2 tracks to the same BPM at the same time, which is a good feature. But other than that, like I'm just so used to it, I kind of like the feel of that, and sometimes it's not always matched right. It's kind of like the computerized match, and it's like I like to adjust it myself, but I don't have anything against anyone that does. It's just like I said, it opens up more possibilities.
And what have you done with vinyl? I didn't know you ever messed with vinyl.
So if anyone was ever interested that's watching this, like if they ever go onto my Cypher page, which is my old project, my original project, I do have some like radio shows and live streams that I've done on like all vinyl sets, and it was mostly drum and bass. Like I collect a lot of drum and bass, a lot of like minimal, dark, like neuro drum and bass from time to time. A lot of critical records. And I like to spin vinyl from time to time, and I collect it. I buy it, and I'll have it. I'll never open it. Sometimes it'll sit there until one day I want to play it. But it's just something I like the feel of it, and there's like the rawness and the level of control with like a vinyl turntable that sometimes you lose with digital. And people, the sound quality and everything, but if you have a record that's been played 1 billion times, then kind of goes away. But I do really love the feel.
Well, I just don't. I'm not even really familiar with like the equipment of that. Is it more rudimentary and like mechanical, or is it just as advanced now, like as a CDJ? Like I don't understand the equipment, because every time I see vinyl, I'm not a DJ, but like I just hear like the scratching and like I've actually heard some people taking 2 vinyls and like beat matching them and fading between and stuff like that. Is it just basically the same kind of deal with just a different disc basically?
It depends. There's different ways of using a vinyl turntable that people are using now, like with phase or some kind of time code, where it is connected to a computer, and the turntables are essentially a controller for Serato or whatever. And in that essence, it is pretty much the same as like a Pioneer CDJ or something, where it is kind of controlling some kind of audio file. And there's that, and then there's just having a record with a needle on it, and there's a lot that comes along with that is required to make that work. Like you kind of need a stable table. Like if you're on some kind of plastic card table, in somebody's living room and people are jumping around, that needle's going to hop around.
Oh,
and,
wow! I've never even thought of that.
There's a lot of moving parts, and there's a lot of adjusting the tone arm and getting it to be just right, and maintaining needles and maintaining cleaning your record and things like that a lot of people just don't want to mess with.
Yeah.
And so people that like the feel of vinyl, but don't want to mess with that, will use time code, where it's just like a record that has like a E, and it sends that signal to the system, and then that controls an audio file on a computer. But the day that we can have that technology and eliminate the laptop or eliminate the computer, I would do that.
Okay.
Because I love that. I love the feel of vinyl, and I don't like having to clean my records and maintain my needles and adjusting the tone arms and making sure that there's bricks on the table and things like that. But but I don't like using a computer. So yeah, the day that somebody comes out with a turntable that has like the almost like the Pioneer display on it. And
just a big fat spot for a vinyl record.
Yeah, you just slap a record on there, or it's just I don't know. Like I like the record on there, so that would be nice. But the day that comes out, I'm all for it. And I know people have made attempts, and there's things like that, and it's kind of moving in that direction. But but for now, CDJs are fine.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah. Cool. And whenever you first started getting into actually DJing, what were some of the musical influences, like genres, artists, like what was your muse at that time?
When I first got into DJing, there was a lot of trance, like DJ Micro, Paul Van Dyke, Infected Mushroom, Hallucinogen, stuff like that. And then there was odd stuff like Aphex Twin and drum and bass. Diesel Boy was at the time, and he's actually from Pittsburgh.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't know that at the time. I didn't find that out until later. But yeah, it's hazy, to be honest. Like I remember we cycled through a lot of music, and I would get a lot of music from friends, and sometimes it would just be CDs that had nothing on it. And I would get these CDs that had music on it, and I would just figure it out, and that was the beauty of it, and that's really what taught me to.
That's fun.
How to be good and not have to like pre-plan so much sometimes.
Yeah.
But Burial was another big influence of mine, which is kind of more in the UK garage two-step, proto dubstep. But yeah, there was so much. I'm sure if I sat here for longer, I could probably remember. But at the time, it was just the astonishment of getting into such a vast subculture, and going through a lot of music very quickly.
Yeah.
DJ Aphrodite is another one that kind of comes up in the drum and bass arena. But yeah, there was tons back then.
I've known you for quite a while, Tony. You're one of my closest friends, and I've heard this story, and I know that we can't tell the Metaterrestrial story without talking about the shooting.
Yeah.
So, as much as you are comfortable with sharing, would you like to kind of set the stage for that and get into what happened?
Yeah, sure. So whenever I was 19, I was a victim of a shooting from about 3 feet away. It was an attempted robbery of my house, and things got physical, and before I knew it, gun went off, and just for context, the other person had the gun. They came in with guns. It was 2 people came in with guns, and wanted to rob the house. And there was some people in the house. I had a roommate at the time. She had some friends over, and then I had a couple friends over, and so I don't know if they realized that there was going to be people like more than me in there or whatever, or I don't know what they thought, but they were a little bit outnumbered, and got intense, and one thing led to another, and I got shot in my neck right here, and
It was like point blank.
it's about 3 feet away, close enough that I did get like plastered with gunpowder. So there was like a gunpowder burn. It was about this big. It was on my neck right here, and fortunately or not fortunately, it was a .22 caliber bullet. Fortunately, because the hole, didn't blow out a big hole in my back, but not, it would have been not so fortunate if it had hit anything, because it, .22 caliber can like play pinball in your body. But it went in my neck and then came out my back left shoulder, and I was standing the whole time. I didn't hit the ground. I didn't lose consciousness yet. I was, standing, confused. It hit a bushel of nerves that controlled nerve endings in my fingers, and so whenever it happened, it's like a bomb went off. My ears are ringing, and like I can't hear anything. My arm shoots up the minute the bullet goes in, and I'm like getting this numbness to my arm and like this tingling sensation to my arm, kind of like when you've been sleeping on your arm for a while, and it's like that kind of feeling, but like the reaction and like the intensity of it made me think that I got shot in my arm. And so my initial thoughts were like, oh my God, I just got shot in my arm. I'm never going to be able to play the guitar again. I'm never going to be able to DJ again. My life is over. And but I'm standing there and I'm just like looking down, and I'm like looking at my arm, and I don't see any bullet hole or blood. And so I'm like, okay. And I'm like confused. So I'm in my hallway. I like walk a couple feet to my bathroom, and I look, and I see that I have blood in my mouth. And I'm like, that's weird. And I look down and I see the hole. And for whatever reason, at that moment, I was just like, I'm gonna be okay. I'm gonna be fine. If this is getting shot in the neck, like, I'm gonna be fine. I'm walking around.
It's a cakewalk.
I'm fine. If I'm not immediately like on the ground, like put down from this, then I'm probably gonna be okay. And so everybody else thought I was dead. And, like they thought I was a goner. It was just a matter of time. So everyone's crying, and it was really intense. And before I knew it, there was detectives walking up the stairs, and I'm waiting in my driveway for an ambulance, and they're grilling me with questions, and they wanted to send me to the city. They didn't want to send me to the hospital that was like closer to town, and so it was a much longer wait for the ambulance. And so I waited in my driveway for 20 minutes. It was like longest 20 minutes of my life.
And you're being questioned by detectives the whole time.
Yeah. Yep. And at that point, the adrenaline is starting to wear away, and I'm starting to lose blood. And going back to the blood in my mouth, it grazed my lungs.
Okay.
And so there was some bruising, and it caused some blood pooling in my lungs, which I was starting to lose lung capacity with, as the minutes were going by.
Wow.
And so that was making it really difficult. And, the people around me are sort of like trying to sponge this blood that is just that's coming out of, my back and my neck, and people are crying, and the detectives are asking me questions, and things are getting fuzzy, and the ambulance eventually does come, and it pulls up, and at that point, they get me on the bed, and then they get oxygen on me, and they must have got it on me right at the right minute, because I did lose consciousness. However, I'm still here. So there was a lapse in time there, and I don't know. I don't think they had me hooked up to any machine that would indicate that could tell me whether or not I died or anything. So I didn't have anyone say like, you were dead. But I definitely went somewhere, and it was a very familiar place. And
what was familiar about it?
Just the feeling of being there was familiar. Like, I have been here before. And the sensation of this, so there's the experience of being there. That's the one thing. Then there's the sensation of the experience. That's another thing. And so, you know, for maybe a year or two up to that, you know, I had been experimenting with DMT, and I had access to it a lot. And so, you know, at that time was definitely not doing it ceremonially, we could say that. You know, I was doing it a lot, and we were, you know, me and my friends were definitely abusing it, I would say. But I was getting a good taste of it, and these like altered states of consciousness, and DMT is one where it's the extreme end of that, and also, you know, through a lot of, you know, Rick Strassman's research and everything, there, you know, one could believe that this has some sort of connection to that space, you know, that space beyond that is debatably you know, an actual place. Separate from our own individual psyche, consciousness, whatever we may imagine on our own.
Right.
And so, so that was another aspect that was familiar. You know, that was another parallel that was like, oh wow, there's some similarities here. And so that was really powerful. And I wake up at the hospital. They, you know, like, they're cutting all my clothes off. They get me into scans and everything, and they eventually indicate that the bullet went out clean and there was no shrapnel or anything, and I didn't really have any surgeries. It was pretty uneventful, honestly, for what happened. It's
Mere
kind of
flesh wound.
It really was. I mean, they called it a superficial wound, you know, which is kind of crazy to think about, you know, a bullet going through your body being considered that.
Just in the right way.
Just in the right way.
Perfect way.
They were honestly flabbergasted, because they were like, there is a small pocket that this bullet can pass through without hitting your carotid artery, which is millimeters away, without doing more damage to my lungs that would be like more permanent, hitting my collarbone or hitting some other bone that would cause it to, you know, maybe go a different direction in my body. You know, more severe nerve damage to my brain, you know, like severe brain damage, you know, things like that. And it just passed right through that pocket. And they were like, you're lucky to be alive. It's like a miracle.
Yeah. I was going to say, I mean, whatever you believe, like, that chance, luck, or miracle, that is incredible. And to, you know, be able to talk with you now, like, you're still here, you know, and what did it feel like, well, you can tell the story how you want, but I would love to hear what you feel like the cosmic or personal significance was of this event.
Well, I feel like, you know, like in hindsight, that period of time in my life, my early teenage years, and really my whole childhood and young adulthood, I had sort of an apathy, and, you know, you could say nihilism, but, you know, when there's also just immaturity, you know, and not really coming into, you know, believing in anything on my own or anything. But there was a level of, like, you know, dangerous nihilism and apathy towards my own life that definitely was present, and, you know, could be partly why this happened, you know, when there's somebody with a gun in my face in my house, and I don't have really any care for my own life, and I am, you know, basically, you know, picking a fight with them, that's going to lead to some problems. And so yeah, I mean, it was a major shift in my perception and my relationship to life, not only my life, but the life of all things. And it was a catalyzing thing. It's not like a night and day. It's not like I woke up at the hospital and, had all these new thoughts and feelings. It was something that I definitely had to, feel into over time and reflecting this experience. But the miraculous nature of it, and the fact that I felt like I was spared in some way, and all of the synchronicities that followed, which was like some of my first really powerful synchronicities of my life, that is what's really started to shift my perception, and I started to become so much more spiritual, not necessarily in a religious sense, but just, my connection to spirit and this space that I had a taste of. Mm-hmm. It gave me the sense of there is something more, there is meaning to this life, mm-hmm. and not just that there is, but it's just like everything is steeped in meaning. Yeah. And from that point forward, just my relationship to others and animals and nature and myself is fundamentally changed from how I was. And and I would like look back at myself then and who I am now, and it's like it's not even the same person. Mm-hmm. And so it set me on the course of the rest of my life that has led up to this project and me like forming this project.
Yeah, it's amazing. I feel like there's so many things that have happened in my life too, where it's like I feel skeptical and agnostic about reality, and just everything is just happenstance, mm-hmm. and chance and luck. But then you have something like you experiment with DMT and you go to a place, and then you have this familiarity whenever you have this experience where you're like on the verge of death.
Yeah.
And that creates a link. Mm-hmm. And I feel like I hear this so many times with people. It could be psychedelics or a profound spiritual experience, or and then relating it to something else and being like, wait, there's actually there's an order to this. Yeah. I don't really know what it is, but it's more than meaninglessness. Mm-hmm. So that's beautiful that you had that experience, and you hear about a lot of people having near-death experiences coming back afterwards like completely changed.
Yeah.
And whether it takes time or they immediately have that, what did it change for you in your relationship to like making music?
It made me want to lean more into the flow state and like that space where something's coming from somewhere else. And it's like not even you. It's almost like you're an antenna and you're picking up a signal. Like wanting to really lean into that, because this, like, again, the sense of this space and this experience,
right?
Where I felt like I went to this space where all that stuff is like floating around, and there's like the essence of that. And there's an essence of that space when I'm in the flow state. And so like kind of chasing that feeling, you could say. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. That, and like, do you feel like you had a semblance of that before, but it wasn't really like concretized, it wasn't like really galvanized before the shooting?
Yeah, I really didn't have something so profound to relate it to.
Yeah.
It's like, this is fun and I enjoy making music in a way where I'm not necessarily coming from a written song. I'm just kind of playing it. I enjoyed that, mm-hmm. but I wasn't relating it to this intangible space that is like, like all encompassing and could potentially link all of this other phenomenon that, that exists. And so,
right.
So now I feel like I know what that is now, and like I have a better sense of what that is, and mm-hmm. and where that's coming from, and this like space beyond here which making music and art and channeling writing, you know, like anything that might involve getting into the flow state, you know, sports even.
Yeah.
It all is playing with that space.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's stepping outside of like the mind and the concept of what I should be doing and just being the art. Right.
Yeah.
Like, and it's funny because like whenever somebody tries a psychedelic and they don't have something else tangible to relate that to, you can just chalk it up to mere hallucination.
Yeah.
But then I feel like there are things that happen whenever we pay attention. The universe is like winking at us like, no, like there's a place, and that's a real place that you go to, and you shouldn't be meddling with these things in an unintentional way. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So is there anything else you wanted to talk about with the shooting?
I feel like there's always a lot that I could say about it. And I'm sure that we will probably reference back to it more in the conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely strengthened my relationship to spirit, and that was like day one of the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. And now here we are.
Yeah.
Talking about this with this crazy trippy mask in between us, and so there's a lot of shift and new way of thinking and also passion and purpose that fell into place after that over the course of many years. Yeah. And so yeah, there's so much I could say, but you know, realistically, how much time we probably have is it, you know, that could be its own podcast.
Totally. Yeah. Well, yeah, I do want to address the white elephant in the room. This very trippy mask right here that is just kind of ominously in the center, you know, taking center stage. What is this mask? What does this mean?
Yeah, that's a great question. So specifically, this mask is an art piece made by the artist Dan Schaub.
Makes amazing art.
Yeah, amazing artist and really kind person. I had the idea for this project and wanting to create this project and the concept before I saw the mask. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's to kind of give context here. I didn't. If you would have asked me, like even just 5 years ago, if I would be having a project where I wear a mask, I would tell you you're full of shit. I never thought that was going to be my thing. I've always, and for you know, over a decade, I've played as a DJ, you know, just myself in front of some turntables, and you know, that's what I thought I would always do. Mm-hmm. But for this particular project, I had a specific concept, and this is like more of an art project, mm-hmm. This Metaterrestrial project. And so I had this concept of almost like helping provide some semblance of this experience of this other space, this other place that I had that experience with. Right. Without somebody necessarily having to get shot in the neck or get, you know, blasted off on some substance or something like that. You know, providing sort of like the essence of that through a stage performance, you know, through a musical act. Mm. That was the concept. And then I saw the mask. Mm. And I was like, holy shit, like that's it. Yeah. And like nothing gave me that feeling like from anything quite like seeing this. And I was just seeing it online. I was seeing it on pictures online. And when I went to go look at this page that he had for this particular mask, I look and I saw that the name was the Solar Entity Mask. Mm. And so for the audience to understand the significance of that, a part of part of the trajectory of my life after the shooting was getting really into environmental causes. And, like I said, the life of the planet and animals and everything just became so significant to me. And I felt like I had such a strong connection with all of the other life on this planet and in general. And so seeing environmental destruction and pollution and decay and everything that, that humans have been doing to this planet, I wanted to do something about that. And so 10 years ago, I got into solar as a profession, and I've been in that ever since, and I've worked up, and it's literally my career now. I started as a technician, and I've worked up to now I'm a project manager for large scale solar installations.
Yeah.
And so that's what I do. That's my life. And I even do it outside of work. Right. I build the mobile solar generator and, for like stage production and like rogue, sound system culture pop-up type events. And so that was, that's such a big part of my life and such a calling of mine and one of my main interests.
You're a man of many hats and masks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the for the audience, if you want to follow your solar project, is called Ra Power, Ra, like Ra, the sun god of Egypt.
So I was already doing that. I've already, I'm deep in that career, and I had the solar generator and was already doing that, and I had this project, wanting to make this project in the back of my mind, and wasn't really looking for a mask. I wasn't looking for something like that, but I stumble upon it, and lo and behold, it's called the solar entity mask.
Yeah.
And so I'm the kind of person that follows these sorts of things. These are the kind of things that guide me in my life.
Yep.
Synchronicities and things like that. And they haven't steered me wrong yet.
Right.
And so I was like, okay, this is significant.
Yeah.
And I reached out to him and I ran it by him and asked him what he thought about it. And he was like, yeah, sure. He was like, that, whatever you want to do. There's limited vision when you're wearing the mask, but if you can pull it off, go for it.
Yeah.
And so I bought one. It wasn't cheap. So it was a bit of an investment at that time. And so, I bought it, and it just became a part of the project.
Yeah.
And another important aspect of this, and there's a lot to do with not just this mask in particular, but just me wearing a mask on stage. Aside from it really fitting and kind of embodying the concept, this project is me kind of wanting to create something that's bigger than myself. Mm-hmm. And sometimes in order to create something bigger than yourself, you sort of have to remove yourself from it. Like you have to kind of remove the ego, like the personality, and that's not to say that's what every project should do. I've had other projects, and I probably will have several other projects. And I doubt that any of the other ones are going to involve me wearing a mask, So it's not like in order for me to perform, I need to wear a mask. I'm not trying to hide myself. I've been on stage. I've been DJing in front of people, for a long time.
Yeah.
It's just that this is a vehicle for driving in the concept of the project itself. It's the art.
Right.
And it's beautiful art on its own. And I feel like it really does complement the project and the actual idea that I'm trying to drive forward with this project, the whole concept. Mm-hmm. And so while a lot of people, I think, are sort of conditioned to see a mask and think, see a mask, a masked band or a masked DJ and think gimmick, I don't think that that's fair to say that about this. And the reason is that if you look at what the word gimmick actually means. It's something that doesn't have intrinsic value. Mm-hmm. And it's something that just somebody's just throwing on as fluff for their thing, or to compensate for something. Okay. They're wanting that leg up or something like that. Yeah. This is it's like helping assist. My concept is as a vehicle to deliver that concept to the audience. Mm-hmm. It's creating an experience for the audience. That's what it's doing. And, deadmau5's mask is also creating an experience for people. And so is, Marshmello and all of those people. Mm-hmm. But is there some deeper, profound, meaning to their project? Maybe. I haven't heard them talk about it like that, but, and I'm not trying to devalue any of the other masked performers out there. Right. Or trying to make it sound like mine is somehow more significant or more important. But I think I look at this as more of a art project than just I'm a DJ with a mask. Right. It's something more than that for me.
One thing I've noticed, and we've talked about this before, is that a lot of DJ culture and musical performance is ego worship. Sure. And there's a lot of
cult of personality.
Cult of personality, yeah. And I feel like your personality in general, I think one thing that is really a good quality that you have is that you are very selfless. And I think that speaks through this project greatly. And, we've also talked about the law of one and social memory complexes and things like that. And ascending as collective energy, does any of that kind of stuff play into, Metaterrestrial?
It does. There's something interesting to me, about, DJ culture and how, it's become very popular, of course. And so, this experience of me, sometimes at shows, seeing a crowd and everyone standing in a crowd in looking up at this one person in front of almost in front of a podium. And right. it's a subtle idol worship that I kind of, it's my own observation, and it's not to say that that's the way that it is, but it's something that has kind of been a little bit of a turnoff for me, where I'm just I kind of want to remove myself from it, because it's just
it's not about you.
It's not about me. It's about the music. It's about the art. It's about the concept. Right. I can be me, and I can shine myself and the essence of me through this. Mm-hmm. And it's not like I'm totally just trying to eliminate myself or hide behind this mask. Mm-hmm. It's that this is about the music. This is about the experience for the audience, and just me being up there. And being this person in front of front of these turntables, and everyone facing me, and it's just they're lower and I'm higher, and it's just it's a strange experience. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't really resonate with me when it comes to being a solo performer anymore. Yeah. And that's not to say again, that's not to say that it's wrong for anyone to be a solo performer without a mask, with an audience that's lower than them or anything like that. It's just a feeling that I've had and an experience that I've had at shows and as a DJ for many years. Mm-hmm. And that kind of cult of personality where it does really become you are a brand, and you are you need to generate all this content of your face, and then all this stuff, and it's just really selling yourself, and that's how the industry works, and that's how it's become. And so I'm kind of in a way in order to do this, in order to have this project where I'm going to keep moving forward as this solo performer in this fashion for this project, I felt it did feel right to be wearing the mask, right. For this particular project. Yeah. Now, other projects, again, I don't think I'm ever going to wear a mask, but
you're not bound to it.
I'm not bound to it.
You can take the mask off.
Exactly. And I may have to at some point when I'm adding flutes to the project and all this other stuff, and maybe my voice and things like that. It might get difficult with the mask.
I've seen you play multiple times. I've seen you perform, and it looks like a very well, you do it so well, and your music is amazing. And just to quote John Welton, who he said at the summer solstice campout last year at my old property that you and I threw, he's like, he has the band The Awakening, and he said he listened to you and he said, you're the only electronic DJ I like. He's like, your music hits, but it doesn't hurt. And I was like, ooh, I like that. It hits, but it doesn't hurt. Like, you can throw in the bass and you can throw in even high treble notes, whatever. But like the way you do it is very mindful, and like there's a beautiful flow. And for me, I've seen you perform and I've listened to your music a lot. I always tell people, about your SoundCloud and stuff. And I do see so much intention in the cadence, the rhythm, the start, the middle, the beginning, the rise and the fall. And there's a lot of, it feels like, from the outside it may look like you're kind of like even stressed out, but I don't see that coming through like in your personality, because you're like wearing a mask, you have CDJs, and then all of a sudden you're whipping out a guitar and you're like shredding the guitar. And like, I think that there's so much beauty to that. And I love that you have carried the guitar through your career and you didn't give that up, even whenever you got into CDJs and everything like that. And if you can talk about with the shooting, any significance with not forgetting the guitar.
Yeah, it's a very important part of it, but it's not something that I think I normally talk about because of the it's very fantastic, and to some people it may come off as not true because of its it's so crazy.
And I feel like if somebody is listening at this point, they're already in. But if you don't want to share it, you don't have to.
No, I can share it. I agree.
We can leave the cliffhanger.
Yeah. So whenever I got home from the hospital, I got out of the hospital 3 days later. They discharged me with just a bandage here, pack of bandages, some ointment, and some painkillers that I hardly took. And I got home. It was weird being in the house. It was very weird being in the house, but I was sitting on...
vibes.
It was strange. It took some adjustment, but I was sitting on the couch and it occurred to me, I was like, this bullet went in and out of me kind of like butter. And I doubt it got slowed down a whole lot because it didn't hit anything like bone or anything. Where did the bullet go? And so I know that they reclaimed a bullet, and I knew that it was on my carpet, but the idea that it just came out of my back and just went and just like landed on the carpet didn't really seem plausible. I felt it was more likely that it did hit something, and it didn't hit anyone. So what did it hit? And I'm looking around, and I'm looking for marks on the wall, and I'm looking for different things, and at some point I see something like glimmering on the carpet, and I look down and it's a guitar string, and I look up and I see my guitar with like a bunch of like frayed wood on the neck, and I'm like, holy shit! Like the bullet hit my guitar, and so I look at it and I'm inspecting it more, and I realized that it didn't just hit my guitar, it hit my guitar on the neck, on the left side where the neck meets the body. Like anatomically, the same place where I got shot.
That's fucking weird.
And it's still, it's one of those things where it was like, at the time, it was like, wow, that's crazy, but it sits with you. And it's one of those things that like never leaves you. And then you get older and time goes by, and then there's always that thing that's just like, that really happened. that really happened. And at the time I was like really leaning into DJing, and I kind of had like abandoned the guitar a little bit. Mm-hmm. And that went on for years. But this incident of the bullet hitting my guitar, it like was like haunting me. It was like, don't forget that shit. Like, that's a part of you. That's a big part of your purpose. Don't forget that. And I would say like ate at me in more recent years, to the point where it was like I couldn't ignore it anymore. It got so loud that I was like, I need to get back into the guitar, which I did. And I ended up just like leaning all the way into the guitar. So it was like I had leaned all the way into DJing for years and kind of abandoned the guitar, would pick it up like once a month or so, but mostly DJing all the time. And then I'm like, okay, I finally listen to the voice, and but I go the entire other direction. I abandon DJing. I'm in a band, and I'm doing that. And then COVID happens, and it was a great project during COVID, and kept me really busy and kept us really busy through that. And I'm really thankful for that. And it caused me to really upgrade all of my equipment, my pedal board, my guitar, and I went through so much different equipment during that time, and just keeping up with being in a band and all of the needs and requirements of maintaining a certain sound, and So, but that wasn't the answer. I thought it's the guitar. I need to just just do the guitar thing. And so I did that, and it was like, no, that isn't it either. And so I realized that it's both. It's not just one thing. It's both. And
right.
So that was this project is me finding that middle and coming to this place of this is what I think it was telling me. This is what I think it was. Just don't forget the guitar. Yeah. Not like the guitar is everything and you need to abandon everything else for the guitar. It's just that don't forget that.
Right.
Don't allow that to leave the picture.
Yeah.
And so this project is bringing that back into the picture, but doing it in a way that's also honoring this powerful experience that was a part of that crazy synchronicity that is pointing me in that direction.
Right.
So in essence, the Metaterrestrial project is me just responding to this very loud voice and doing it in such a way that is honoring that whole experience.
Yeah, that's amazing, man. And it carries through. I mean, your music is more than just a performance, it's an experience. And that's why anytime I have the opportunity, I'm always at your set, even if it's at 2 a.m, because the schedule got shifted.
Thanks, brother.
I'm dancing for this. It's more, and it's the whole thing, the whole movement of it. And I'm glad that you were able to also notice that synchronicity with the guitar neck and your neck, and the strange significance that I know you don't like to share that, because you're just this sounds crazy. You would not believe it if I told you, and you don't have the guitar anymore, but it's why would you make that up too?
Right. At the end of the day, it's for me. It was an experience that happened for me to find my purpose, and so I don't really tell a lot of people that. Because in the beginning, whenever I was telling people about it, I was getting oh yeah, right, and then it got to a point where I was just I don't even want to tell this, and it's not really for them, it's for me. So, but it is such an important part of it.
Yeah.
And it's hard because these were the days of cheap flip phones, and the picture that I have of it is long gone.
Yeah. And
the guitar was still there was a newer guitar, so it was still covered under warranty. Which, side note, one of the funniest insurance claim calls of my entire life. Where did it get shot? So you were on stage, and then it got shot, and then you got the shot too, and it's it was
Start
looking
from
back.
The beginning.
Yeah, they had me repeat it probably a dozen times so that they get the entire office to hear this over and over again. But ultimately, I had to send the guitar in, and I got a card with the value of that guitar on it, and I bought a new guitar with it.
Right.
And I kick myself every day for that. Yeah. It's so much.
It should be hanging on the wall somewhere.
Yeah. It's worth so much to me more now than that $400 on a card.
Right.
It just. Yeah, but nonetheless, it's for me, and it's doing its job.
Yeah.
But my ability to prove that. I have witnesses. I have friends that saw it, that came to the house and saw it like that. Yeah. But at the end of the day, I mean, I'm not trying to prove anything. It's just it's doing its medicine. You know, it's doing its job on me, and I'm going in the direction that it's pushing me, and that's all that matters.
And it speaks your actions. It's that whole experience. Your actions speak for that, and it's another example of like your selflessness in general. Like, it's not about like, you know, sharing this grand story and this whole thing that happened. You're just like, I'm just doing the work. Like, this is my purpose, one of them. So and is there any other things about the Metaterrestrial project that you wanted to share?
Yeah, so someone might look at this when they're at a performance, or they see pictures and they're like, well, what are you? Like, what are you trying to be?
What is this? Yeah.
And so I just want to put it out there, like, you know, want to preface with this, like, I don't think that I necessarily, Anthony Arcuri, is metaterrestrial, like by nature. You know, I don't think that I'm an alien or anything. You know, I'm not trying to, you know, front here. You know, like I'm a person. I'm just trying to deliver this experience through my performance, and I think that the mask and that whole embodiment is a good representation, a good visual stimuli for the audience to receive that and have that experience. But if I were to explain to somebody what this is to me, I would say it's like an angel. I mean, I'm not like super religious. You know, I research all kinds of religions, you know, esotericism, and I'm fascinated by it. I don't wholeheartedly believe a lot of things. You know, I keep an open mind. And so I just, you know, I entertain things, and I research a lot of spiritual scriptures, and to me, this embodies a like higher dimensional, higher density entity that is service to others oriented, and that is like pure light. And this is like that like conscious geometry form that people talk about from DMT experiences. You know, they talk about these beings that are like, it's like this kaleidoscopic geometry that is conscious, you know, the conscious geometry entities. That's what this is to me, you know, like, and I've had so many of those experiences.
I see it. And I mean, I've also dabbled a lot with DMT, and I have spoken with these multi-dimensional geometric conscious beings that may have been an angel, may have been God, I don't know. And they're speaking to me in geometry, and I totally understand. And then I come back and I'm like, what happened? But like in that space, in that time, it's fully coherent. And it just speaks on like a vibrational level. And it's beautiful to have something here that is pointing towards that. And it takes the person there, I think, whether they know it or not.
Yeah, I'm super appreciative of Dan for his work and really embodying that archetype, because that's ultimately what it is to me. I feel like Metaterrestrial and like the persona and like this imagery, it's sort of like an archetype for that, like that sort of, you know, you could say entity, but it's like an energy too.
This is like a doorway.
It is, and it's a doorway to experiencing the sort of like an essence of that, without necessarily having to be in that space, or, you know, God forbid, in a near-death experience.
Right, which is great for people, because they they don't have to do drugs, and they don't have to almost die.
And I found something really interesting happen is that, you know, like people that would seemingly not normally partake in that kind of thing are sometimes the most drawn to this project. You know, there are people that have partaken in substances or have had, you know, very spiritual experiences. You don't need drugs to get to these places. You know, I want to state that, like, you know, meditation, breath work, contrast therapy, you know, there's so many different paths to get there. And you know, certain substances can be like a way to like thrust you into that space, but by all means not the only path there. But the people that have partaken in that and are familiar with that are kind of look at that and they're like, oh yeah, I get it. They're like, all right, like I get it. But it's the people that haven't partaken in that that seem to be the most drawn to it sometimes. Yeah. And like after shows, like like an older woman and her young son at a festival that I'm at, like a more family friendly festival, will come out like to the stage and like want to talk to me and like have all kinds of questions and be so fascinated by it. Neither of them have partaken in anything that would have given them any of that experience before. Right. And so to me, that's like, that warms my heart, because that's this project doing its work. Like the people that have done this and that have blasted off a billion times, like, this is for them, but it's not for them. Like it's, like they can enjoy it.
They've been there. They've been there, done that.
You've been there, like you get it.
Yeah.
But this is, it's really powerful to me whenever that kind of person or people come and have that kind of experience and are so like drawn to it after that, because I'm like, you had that experience.
Yeah.
You had the experience.
And like even beyond that too, it's like, if we are reincarnated beings, like we've all been there. I mean, it is ultimately it's like what we are made of.
Yeah.
And I feel like people, whether they've done DMT or breath work or almost died, or gotten into a flow state, like ultimately it does do something to us when we see something like this, or we hear the music and the energy that you're carrying. There's a familiarity, right?
Yeah.
Like going back to like your experience.
Yeah.
And so like you are bringing that experience out with what you do, which it's more than just music. It's more than just art. It's more than a performance. Like it's like a ceremony.
Right, exactly. And regardless of whether or not somebody has partaken in some kind of substance or have had a near-death experience or anything like that, there is going to be somewhat of a familiarity to it.
Yep.
At least like, what I'm trying to channel with this. I feel like that's something that I would have felt like was familiar regardless of whether or not I had been in some of these spaces. Yep. Like I said, it was just like I felt like I had been there before.
Yeah.
Not necessarily from any kind of substance, but just from past incarnations.
Yep.
And so that's another aspect of like, well, why do you wear a mask? Well, it's like, this human body is a mask. In essence, I'm kind of taking off the human mask and putting on my like spirit mask. And that's what this is for me as a ceremony.
Yeah, metaterrestrial.
Yeah.
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 That's, yeah, exactly. What is the significance of the meaning metaterrestrial? I've never heard that before. I've heard extraterrestrial, but what does metaterrestrial mean?
Yeah, so metaterrestrial is sort of like a combination of the words metaphysical and extraterrestrial. I didn't create this word. I didn't make this word up. It actually was already existing. Not necessarily in any dictionary that you might find, but it was a term that was coined by Dr. J. Allen Hynek, who, if someone listening doesn't know who that is, he was sort of like the head of Project Blue Book, which Project Blue Book was a government project to study the UFO phenomenon, and it took place between the mid 50s and the late 60s. And it actually was created to dispel and debunk the UFO phenomenon.
Oh.
But J. Allen Hynek...
Is it like a psyop? Almost.
It's believed that it was. And later, towards the end, it became more apparent because the people were refusing to look at the evidence that they were actually receiving. But they were more of a public and civilian, outward-facing program. So it was like they received phone calls, sort of too.
Okay.
It was sort of public relations too, because they would make statements and dispel certain things that happened, and swamp gas or this or that, things like that. And but J. Allen Hynek was he was actually in this for the right reasons. And he had under him Jacques Vallée, who is also a very prominent person in this genre of UFO research, but they're both scientists, that just wanted to study the UFO phenomenon from a scientific perspective, cataloging data and just looking at it at face value objectively. And they ended up coming to that there is something to this. And so there probably became a little bit of disillusionment within the program, and then they ended up parting ways from it. But J. Allen Hynek coined the term metaterrestrial because that was sort of a hypothesis of what, basically the metaterrestrial hypothesis of what some of this phenomenon could be. And so by metaterrestrial it's basically saying non-physical.
Yeah.
Some of the non-physical or psychic element of some of this phenomenon.
Yeah.
And so Jacques Vallée sort of took this and went a lot further, and he wrote a lot of books and, Passport to Magonia, Dimensions, Confrontations, and Revelations is another good 3-book series. Okay. I've read a lot of his books, and I'm a big fan of his work, just in how objective and scientific he is about researching it, but he doesn't let the confines of like mainstream science limit him, because there is scientism, like where it's like it's a religion in itself, where it's just like we're just not going to believe certain things if we can't prove it.
Right.
But there are some things that we literally just can't prove.
Right.
But doesn't mean we should roll them out and throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. And so he's written a lot of books on this, and between the two of them and a lot of other scientists, they have formed what is called the Invisible College. So the Invisible College is a name for early scientists. This is maybe in the Renaissance time, that wanted to study science, but it was actually forbidden from the church. And so they had to study science in secret because it was so controversial, and they could literally get their heads chopped off. Mm-hmm. And so they created what was called the Invisible College, where they could literally study science underground. And Jacques Vallée and J. Allen Hynek and some others formed a sort of a new Invisible College, so that they could study this UFO phenomenon from a scientific perspective without, the backlash and having their careers ruined and reputations ruined and things like that. And so behind closed doors and secrecy, they sort of study this more in depthly and exchange information and such. But a lot of the findings, a lot of the research, it comes through in Jacques Vallée's books, and it evolves over time, as something would when you're trying to understand it and not getting locked on or really emotionally attached to any one hypothesis.
Right.
And so over time, you've seen what they believe this phenomenon is kind of evolve, but that metaterrestrial hypothesis element has kind of stuck for the most part, as a large possibility. There is something non-physical going on here.
Yeah.
And they do that by cataloging data from the start of written history to present day. And just taking that data of these kinds of experiences, whether it be UFO phenomenon or, experiences with just, other things that are out of the ordinary, whether it be the jinn or ghosts or things, paranormal experiences, which a lot of people may write off as nonsense, but they, just being the kind of scientists they are, they're taking it and they're looking at what's happening here. This was in the 1800s. And this was literally documented by the governor and or the sheriff of the town.
Okay.
And they
why would they lie about it?
Right. Yeah. Or the entire town saw this.
Yeah.
And this was a mass sighting. So they take these sorts of things that are high probability, they wouldn't have made this up. This was actual town record, and they catalog it and they just look at it. And Jacques Vallée is a computer scientist, so he's good at aggregating data and organizing data.
Yeah.
And so he's able to catalog these things and look up the smell of ozone before a sighting, and then boom, 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 Germany, Belgium, France, vast distances apart. over large periods of time.
Yeah.
And it's like there are these elements that are the same. And so while the nature, like while the imagery of like these crafts or these entities have changed over time, whether it have been like the Fae, the or now like the Greys, or whatever it is, the nature of these experiences has stayed the same. There have been a lot of these similarities, and so it's the unified paranormal hypothesis that we're kind of getting into here, and so. So this experience of this like other place that I witnessed and that I had this experience of, and the kind of phenomenon that they're talking about, I deeply feel like there's a connection. I feel like there is a similarity, and so Metaterrestrial is a much broader term that can describe all of what we're talking about.
Right.
And so that is why I chose that name for this project. And the entity that we were talking about, that this sort of is in essence Metaterrestrial.
Yeah.
And so that kind of gives a little more backstory into the name itself. But this is a topic that really deserves its own podcast. Like we could go off on this, and I could probably talk about this for another few hours. But
I mean, if you could like just encapsulate, like what do you think is going on beyond this? What is Metaterrestrial? Like what is beyond this realm? What do you believe?
So
your research and experiences.
I believe that there is a force or a presence that is trying to influence our spiritual growth, and they are seeding experiences in individuals and sometimes groups and thus the collective over long periods of time in a way that is in alignment with where that group is culturally or time, geographically, whatever, that they need at that time to have a particular experience that imbues them with the idea or the awareness or a taste of this otherness, and is essentially preparing us for the imminent merging with the non-physical or experience of the non-physical.
Wow, that's really beautifully put. And I just thought about you and like what you're doing, like as like an arm of that, and it's like you're like a servant of that. Does that resonate with you?
It does, and that is kind of what I'm doing. And if you see what's happening right now, in like sort of like current events and things, like the telepathy tapes. Or in like a lot of these sightings and like the orb sightings, and like it's like starting to raise in intensity. There's a lot that's starting to happen in a higher frequency. It's like a higher, like frequency of events is starting to occur. Yeah. The telepathy tapes, like that is like its own thing, and if people have seen that, then they know what I'm talking about. But if they haven't, I don't want to like leave them hanging. But it's essentially a Harvard scientist has been studying nonverbal autistic children and is doing real scientific tests that are revealing that these nonverbal autistic children are displaying telepathic abilities. They're reading their parents' minds, and they're able to display this and prove it in a like in front of a group and in a way that can be tested and measured. And it's at like a 90 to 100% success rate in being able to guess what random word is in a book that they flip to without them being able to see it, what object is in a drawer that they can't see, what word someone is thinking that they don't even know, that they might not even know what that word means. Right. And they're communicating with each other. Supposedly these children are saying that they're communicating with each other in a place that's not physical called the Hill.
Yeah, right.
And they all go there, and they go there to communicate and exchange information, to the point where some of these autistic children that are thought to be totally like lost cause are never going to be able to like understand. They're like literally teaching them like blocks and like ABC and like colors and stuff, when in reality they're going to the hill and they're learning like the full Declaration of Independence word for word, and are able to write it down for for somebody to read, and
Wow.
it's like 100% accurate.
Yeah.
And so it's like, how do they know that information? Where are they getting that from?
Right.
Yeah. And so these things are happening. And so if you don't already have a relationship with spirit, or are starting to have these kinds of experiences and coming to terms with this potential reality, it may become a rude awakening for some people. And so what are ways we can help people, bring people into that space where we're not having to give them a drug, we're not having to shoot them in the neck, we're not these things that are those are very extreme, throw yourself into the pool without water wings kind of thing, that isn't going to work for everybody. And I'm not saying that this is some project that's going to like blow up to international stardom, and I'm going to have like this like mass profound impact and shift the consciousness. That would be great, but like, if I'm going to do something that's in alignment with me and my experiences that I've had, and these things that I've been researching that are resonating with me, that I feel like there's really something to them, then this is it. Like that's what this is for me, and that's the work that I'm trying to do.
And I believe that you were chosen for this. I do believe that, because of your selfless nature. I think that there's something really delicate about this kind of work. Like somebody who's like in the role of like a priest or a shaman or whatever, a yoga teacher, breathwork coach, things like that. If there's any ego that gets wrapped up in that, it can be really dangerous. And I always see you putting yourself second. And a lot of times, like in our conversations, I'm like, Tony, what do you want? And like, but I feel like you were chosen for this role, and from some, something greater than what we understand, something meta-terrestrial. And so I think it's just perfect what you're doing. And I do.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. Something's trying to tell me something, through that experience that happened to me. And this is just me trying to listen to it. And me trying to finally heed the call and listen to that loud voice. And
you've been kind of, in the last couple months, really reorienting yourself with like what this project means. And I noticed like you were you're talking about like pulling tarot cards, pulling the Hermit a lot. And you were really focusing on making music this winter. And I've heard some of your unreleased tracks, which is really, really sweet. What do you have coming out right now, if you're ready to move on to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I've sat with this for a while, and like how I want to start to like release the music that I've been sitting on. An album to me is something that like has like one whole congruent theme, and I don't know. I think that right now I've just been in like this like trying to just create, and not like, oh well, I need to stick to this theme or master these all the same way, or the kind of things that people do with albums. And so I don't know if I'm going to just release it as one body, but I'll probably maybe release singles and EPs out of what I have created. And then I definitely have an album up my sleeve, and something that is following a congruent vibe and theme and its own concept that I'm like in the process of gearing up for. But yeah, I mean it's a mixture of live recorded percussion and instruments, along with synthesized elements and sampled sounds and, different found sounds, things around my studio.
Nature-based.
Different nature sounds and things like that. And so, I would say that a lot of what I do have coming is kind of falls into the realm of, what people call like 140 or like deep dubstep or whatever, but also with like world and, tinge to it, world elements and a flavor to it, which is something that I like feel like really strongly about. I've always wanted music to take me places. So I'm fascinated by other cultural instruments and, my family, part of my family comes from Cyprus, and so integrating those cultural sounds into the music is something that I feel like is like a part of this project for me, and so I'm not really putting any limitations on genre. Like I kind of like to try to stay away from that, because in essence my project is trying to break those boundaries of genre and geographical borders and things like that. Yeah. So it's going to be music. It's going to be music that might make you feel something. It's going to be music that might make you dance. But it's not going to be definitive of what may be to come.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, and I like that you're not boxing yourself in, and I think that really, speaks to the project in general. It's like it's not one thing,
right.
But I mean, you definitely have like tribal fusion, EDM, temple bass, world eclectic kind of style, and it's just all the music I love. Before I even like knew that's what the music you make, I'm like, that's my jam. So it's really awesome that you play that, because I really like it. So you have you're releasing a couple singles and you have an album, and when do you expect did you release the singles yet?
So I haven't released anything yet, and I will probably be
Light is making a dance party in here for us. I don't know if people can see it, but we are. If you're listening, we have one of our lights is like making a techno party.
It's kind of trippy, yeah.
You can turn it off or whatever.
Yeah. But I haven't released the singles yet, and I plan to soon.
Yeah.
I'm just probably sitting on it a little too long and need to release it. But as I'm working through and creating other things, like I'm finding myself discovering other like possibilities and like going back and changing them. And so they say like sometimes like art or music or poetry is never finished. The artist just abandons it. Like that's, you just settle and you're just like, okay, this is it, because you can work at it and chisel at the stone forever, but eventually, there's not gonna be anything left, or
right.
what the essence of what it was from that flow state kind of starts to get changed and altered. Right. And so I'm trying to avoid that, but this has been a process, and moving from like mostly playing instruments and like using like hardware gear to being more in the box and like producing within Ableton has been like a more newer endeavor as within like the last like 3 or 4 years. And so I'm learning a lot and still wanting things to be somewhat like okay to release. And so that's sometimes a difficult place to be.
It's probably hard whenever you like make one track and then you spend like 5 hours listening to different sounds. And you're like, oh, I should have had this sound in that track. That would have been more embodied with that. And then you have to go back and like change it. And it's, but yeah, I think you already know. Sometimes you can't get too myopic with it too.
Right.
If you're just like focusing on the one thing, and then it's like an artist putting too much detail into their work, and then suddenly like the shadows are not out of balance now, you know, and they should have just left it with one stroke instead of like 20.
Yeah, overproduced,
yeah, too much detail. So, you'll release it whenever it comes, but you're thinking this year, right?
Oh, for sure, 100% this year.
For anybody listening, this is in 2025, so just we don't want to encapsulate ourselves. When was this released? Is there anything else you want to share about your project that wasn't spoken of today?
I think we've covered a lot, and there's always more to say. There's always more that could be said about it, and I, maybe could save that for future interviews or podcasts. But that's probably more than I've gotten out yet on camera, especially about the project. So, do you have like a message? Like, what is if you could say it in like 2 sentences, what is the message of Metaterrestrial? Hold on to childlike wonder. We don't have it all figured out. There's still a lot of mystery to this experience. So hold on to that wonder. Perfect. Yeah, we'll leave it at that. I'll leave all your links in the show notes, and you can find you on Instagram, SoundCloud. Sounds good. Thank you so much, Tony. This was such a long time coming. I'm so glad that we did this finally to give you the platform that you deserve and that this project deserves. Yeah, much love, man. I really appreciate it. Much love, brother. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Gab Lab podcast. Check out our previous episodes and follow the guest. All the social links are in the show notes. Any place you can give us a 5-star review really helps. Follow us on social media, and we will see you in the next episode. Peace.